name is Heber Brown III. I am the host of Brothaspeak. Hello and welcome to this special edition of Brothaspeak. I am your host. My name is Heber Brown, and I'm certainly delighted that you came back once more to get some more of Brothaspeak. And I promise you, you're in for a treat this time around. This show is really historic in a number of ways. It's historic because Brothaspeak, for the time that we've been on the internet, we've attempted to grapple with some very pressing social and political issues that primarily impact people of African descent. And on this particular show, we're going to continue in that vein, but also bring in some political candidates, the first for our show. So that's the first historic element. A couple of other historic elements for Brothaspeak is the fact we have our first white gentleman is on the show.
I'm honored.
In the person of Mr. Kevin Zeese, who is a U.S. Senate candidate. Some of you have seen and read and heard, and perhaps you haven't. And so that's why I wanted to bring him on for those who might not have gotten a chance to hear his message and meet him before that fateful day, November the 7th. Let's go around and introduce the kind of the fixtures as well. Mr. Ted Smith, many of you know him. You've heard his views and his points. Of course, Mr. Kevin Zeese, good brother and friend of mine. Mr. Tyrone Keys, whose unique insight always seems to amaze me. And I promise his card still says Democrat, but sometimes I wonder. But I'm so glad that he has joined us. And another historic guest and a historic moment for the show, because on this show we also have a good sister. Oh, I love her to death. Delegate Jill Carter, who is one of the few elected officials that Baltimore City, particularly black Baltimoreans, can really depend on. And so I'm glad to have you on the show as well. Historic. The first female on the show, first white on the show. Put on your seatbelt. It's going to be a great show today. Let's start by talking to Mr. Kevin Zeese about his candidacy and his positions on issues. The brothers have done some homework, and we want to grill them. Just for the sake of full disclosure, for those of you who didn't see the previous episode, maybe the last one or the previous one, Ted and myself, we did endorse Mr. Zeese for this particular race, for the U.S. Senate race. And so I'll put that out there out front. Tyrone is
Tyrone did not endorse me.
Tyrone did not endorse you.
But he didn't endorse anybody.
So
he's still open. I'm still convinced him.
And that's why we brought Kevin Zeese on, because we want to pull Tyrone over to our side. So, but first, Kevin, welcome. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Let's hear about your candidacy. What issues? Who are you? What defines your campaign?
Well, I've been a lawyer for about 30 years and an activist, worked on a whole range of issues. Started with the drug war, trying to end the drug war, and put it into more of a health-based approach to dealing with drug problems. I worked with Mayor Schmoke in Baltimore in the mid-1980s. I currently lead an anti-war group, Democracy Rising. It's a website's democracyrising.us. We're trying to get a rapid exit from Iraq. We're also trying to prevent another war in Iran. I also consistently raise the question of our support for Israel, which I think is a mistaken choice. We provide them 20% of the defense budget. Every bomb Israel drops is a Made in the USA sign. And if you want to know why they hate us, I think that you may want to start looking at that question as well. So I decided to run because I saw the two anointed candidates by the two parties, Mr. Steele and Mr. Cardin, as being exactly what's wrong with this country. They are the classic corporate candidates. Michael Steele essentially has never voted on anything in his life. He's never held a position where he's had to vote, so we don't really know how he's going to do that. And if you look at his website, it's very sketchy on what his policies are. And he's pretty much chosen by the Karl Rove Bush machine. And he's been funded by them as well. And so I don't think he'll be a challenge to President Bush. He's wrong on the Iraq War. He just does not get that at all. He's wrong on health care. He has no solutions there. So I see him as not really a viable choice for anyone who really wants to solve problems. Ben Cardin is almost the opposite. He's been in office for 40 years, in Congress for 20 years. Yet he says with a straight face he's going to bring change to Washington. He's been there for 20 years, and he still says with a straight face he'll bring change. He has gotten more PAC contributions than any candidate in Maryland, including the two senators. So a congressman getting more PAC money than anybody else. And he's also, what I find interesting about his campaign is he's dishonest about what he stands on. He says he's an anti-war candidate, and he did vote right on that first vote, but he's had 14 wrong votes since then. He's voted for $320 billion for the Iraq War. He's voted against every call for an exit strategy, not even with a deadline, just develop an exit strategy. Against that, he's voted for resolutions that call Iraq a moral war and stay the course. He's voted in favor of the Patriot Act 3 times. If you look at his votes, he is the corporate candidate. And so I see the major problem I see in our culture and in our government is corporate control of government. And so I see these two candidates as examples of exactly what the problem is. Neither one will bring change, and the people want change. So that's why I'm running.
Let's go to Mr. Carden's record on Iraq for a minute. And I've heard you say on other interviews and read and did research myself that he voted against the war in Iraq, but he voted for the funding.
And against exit strategy and for staying the course.
But for the funding strategies, could he have voted against funding things like helmets and equipment? And is that really...
What he could do is he could join the bill that's already introduced by Congressman McGovern from Washington that calls for voting for funds to bring our troops home. So even if he wants to, continue to vote for those budgets, where I think is a mistake, I wouldn't vote for those budgets personally. I think that those budgets are filled with corruption. They're filled with Halliburton money. They're filled with Bechtel money. They're filled with building permanent military bases. They're filled with building the largest embassy in the world in Iraq, and he's voted for all that. So it's not just helmets. So don't come. We fund the military through the DoD budget. The salaries are getting paid for the soldiers. So it's not like you're not defunding the military if you don't vote for those extra budgets for Iraq. But he could, if he wants to vote for those budgets, at least put in a bill that says he wants to see the troops come home. That he wants to. He claims in his re-election, in his election effort, that he's for bringing the troops home. Well, where's the evidence? Why hasn't he introduced anything? Why isn't he joining any of the bills that have been introduced? He's been silent. He's done nothing. So his proclamation he's a peace candidate, his record doesn't support it. And I find that kind of dishonesty. With this multi-million-dollar ad campaigns that put out a false image of yourself. It's exactly what's wrong with politics in America. Politics that tell voters one thing and then do the opposite.
You're here in part, you said before we came on the show, in part because of a comment made by our good brother Tyrone about if you were to make it and really win this election, that you would be virtually powerless because you would be outside of the two main corporate political parties. Can you address that?
I see it exactly the opposite. I see that if I were to win, it would be such a shock to the system that someone would come from the outside and succeed, that would be a message to both parties to wake up or watch out. And it would also be a message to the independent political movement that they really can win. So that would have been a gigantic message to the status quo politics. And if I'm in office, the way I would handle it, I've been an activist for 30 years. And so I would bring 30 years of organizing and advocacy to the table. And so what I would do is turn my office into a foot in the door for the American people. And I would not be stuck by the party hierarchy and silenced. I'd be able to tell the truth. And being a truth teller in the Senate about what's really going on is a very powerful place to be. Second, to be a very closely divided Senate. And, Cardin and Steele are predictable. They'll vote whatever the corporate leadership tells them to do. Cardin will vote the corporate line like he always has, and Steele will do what the Bush administration, who's funded him, he'll do what they tell him to do. I will be a vote that's not predictable. And so in a close Senate, my vote will count, and they'll come to me to get my vote. And so I'll be able to make demands. And so I think I'll have more power that way. And then third, as I said, to bring this organizing experience, I would hire the best organizers on the issues I care about: peace, justice, democracy, and prosperity. I'd hire the best organizers to work within the Senate and also outside the Senate to organize in Maryland and to organize nationally. And in Maryland, I want to start to build essentially a strong base of a progressive political movement that brings together the African-American community, disenchanted whites, the anti-war community into a voting bloc that could really dominate politics in Maryland. I think that's a powerful voting bloc that we haven't really developed yet. If we do develop it, we can change the course of Maryland history. So I think I'd be actually a very powerful senator, much more than Cardin or Steele, who would be predictable senators. They'll vote the status quo. I'll be there challenging things.
You stand corrected?
No. I do agree with Mr. Zeese that we do need some sort of strong third party, some sort of alternative to the two-party system that we have today, because it's not competitive. You basically are pretty much assured that you're going to get one or the other. In most places, you know what you're going to get. In Maryland, you knew for 40 years you were going to get Democratic governor. So my issue with the power piece, I do agree that your victory would wake up the establishment, would, shake things up from that standpoint. But until you're able to get independent candidates in every level of government, I mean, look at Baltimore City, for example. You don't have a chance of getting an independent city council person elected because the city electorate is so myopic that I honestly think that Bugs Bunny could probably run for, town council person. And
put a D next to his name, he's elected.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that, Jesus could come down here and run as a Republican and
or green.
Probably lose in Maryland. Yeah. So from that standpoint, I think that the electorate has a lot more maturing to do before you can actually see a viable third party.
Well, let me ask you a question. I have a question for you, Tyrone. How do we?
Supposed to be
no, I'm just asking.
It's a conversation.
I'm asking you.
Oh man, he's defensive. He's defensive. You got him scared, my man.
How do we move past this two-party stagnation if you don't begin to make the moves that Kevin Zeese and others are doing? I mean, we have to start somewhere.
Right, and I'm not saying that
he's not
because right.
Well, no, I'm just asking. What would you recommend if you're saying that? Okay, you might be powerless. What would you recommend?
Well, I would recommend that he definitely and independent candidates out there continue to run for office, because at some point, if there starts to be victories among the independents, then a groundswell will occur and you'll have a tipping point, and then they'll become more viable on a local, national, and statewide scale. Or if you get, for instance, not to telegraph the next show, but if you get an independent governor, for example, then that governor, especially depending on the state you go into, comes in with a greater modicum of strength because he is the chief executive of the state. Whereas in the Senate, this individual, Mr. Zeese, for example, should he be elected, is one of many, and the many, their voices would overpower his.
Yeah, but Tyrone, the thing about it is, though, both parties want me to caucus with them because it's going to be a close Senate. They both want me on their team, and so I'll be able to say it right from the outset. You want me to caucus with you? What am I going to get for it? So right there, I start a negotiating process that is negotiating from a position of strength, and so because my vote will matter. They will want me to be in their majority. And so right from the beginning, I get some strength. And then every step of the way, you have that kind of negotiation. So I agree, it's much better if there's more independence, but having someone elected into an office as high profile as a Senate office will spur a political movement. It'll give people hope. And that's what bothered me about your message more than anything else on the show a couple weeks ago, was the powerlessness. That's what we got to overcome. We have to overcome a sense of powerlessness. We have to instead begin a message of power out, that every voter has power, every citizen has power. I look at history, and I see so many individuals who make a difference, whether they're elected or not. And I think we all got to see ourselves as that potential. If we care what's going to... So that's what bothered me about your message.
We agree on that, but let me put it
that.
Another way.
Yeah.
I think the institution of the Congress is, as you said, and we agree on this, is at this point so corrupt that one or two individuals that go into a 400-member House or a 100-member Senate, realistically, what chance do they have as a lone member out there against the corruption that's institutionalized in the body?
That's a really good point. That's why I mentioned the first thing I said was one of my powers would be as a truth teller. Because what's happening in our Congress right now is the corruption is so rife, it's so widespread, that if you have someone inside who can say, hey, look at that corruption, and here, I'm inside, I can tell you about this corruption, it's a powerful place to be. And so I think, again, being the lone voice who's not controlled by the hierarchy gives me the ability to really point out what the obvious is.
And the potential is there, but I'm in D.C. every day.
And I'm an advocate, I'm a fighter, so I'll make sure it comes out.
The potential is there, but on certain things, if it works like this, and you know this, maybe some of the viewers don't, but in D.C., as in the House over in Annapolis, you don't play ball. You're not going to get certain committee assignments. You're not going to be in the know. You're not going to be in a position to tell the truth about certain things because you just won't be aware of them.
Let me jump in there for a second, because that's a great segue to our delegate here. I wanted to ask you, because my question to you was going to be, aren't truth tellers isolated and alienated and pushed at the margin so that you don't have a chance? Sure, you want to go out there and tell all the dirt, tell the dirt, but will you be able to bring back resources? Will you be able to open up jobs and that type of thing? Delegate Carter, I mean, we've not had the discussion before, but I have a sense that you may experience that because you have a very truth-telling spirit, and you stand up for the people. But standing up for the people doesn't always allow you to go well with the structure and the system. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a difficult balance, and I think that, in listening to Kevin talk about what he would do, I thought about myself a lot on a local level because I feel very much like that has been my role, where I haven't always been successful on legislative initiatives. I have been able to come back and talk to my constituents and talk to people like you in forums like this about the fact that neither the city or the state did the right thing by the Baltimore City Public Schools when it came to funding and that sort of thing. So there is a place for that. And I also believe that when I first got elected, believe it or not, even though I'm a Democrat, I was the first person, like the governor, who was the first elected in 37 years Republican, I was the first non-incumbent to be elected in Baltimore City politics in 30-some years.
Wow.
So we still have a system where you have selected politicians, people that come from political machines, and in different factions and different groups and organizations in the city. So it was a new thing, and it was unheard of that I was elected. And so when I first got there, I did find that the delegation in large part paid attention to what I was doing. I think they didn't expect for me to be as independent thinking as I was. So I found that the more I was able to galvanize people to come into the delegation meetings and for example, when I had controversial bills like the bill to get the lead out of the water in city schools, which I know it's hard to believe that's controversial.
Right.
But when I found is that when I was able to bring constituents from Baltimore down and have them kind of in your face, I was able to be successful. The thing is, it's a very difficult thing to do on every issue. There's so much going on. And truthfully, the public has a short attention span. So you're not able to do it on every issue that's important. So you have to kind of pick and choose. This is what I'm going to go to the mat on. And, there are other things, frankly, that I find is very difficult. But I don't always take the independent stand. For example, and, this is difficult, but it's true. Where I know that there's zero chance of success, and it's not all that bad anyway, there are times when I decide, I may vote against it, I may not vote, but I'm not going to make, yeah.
Okay. I think Delegate Carter has shown actually how you can be effective as a truth teller, and not just the lead in the water, but I think your points on O'Malley's arrest policy. That you are the one saying the truth, and it's a truth everybody knows. And so you go doing that, it adds to the power of it. You can see the media starting to pick up on you now on that. And if I was in the Senate, for example, the Senate basically works from Tuesday to Thursday. Everyone was home campaigning on Monday and Friday, or traveling back to Hawaii or California. So you have Monday and Friday essentially open, the whole Senate to you. So I could be holding hearings, I could be writing, I could be inviting up, mock hearings, obviously, because it's not the Senate's not in session. I could invite up people who follow money in politics, who can testify about that. I can put a spotlight on future leaders that right now get ignored. And so that's a very powerful position to be, to build a movement on all these issues that we care about.
Well, one thing that I like in terms of what Delegate Carter stands is that it's gotten the average person a lot more involved in politics. Look how many people come to like illegal arrest hearings, or just the rallies, or people that are paying attention to important legislation or lobbying for particular efforts. I think the problem with American politics, because it's corporate run, is that the average person feels left out of the process. They feel powerless.
Exactly.
But when you see a truth teller, they get the average person that much involved, and I think that is potential for a snowball effect. I've never seen as many people involved in fighting for particular issues, whether it's illegal arrest, whether it's lead in water, whether it's the Baltimore City public school system, as in these past 2 years.
I think Delegate Carter
people have been standing up like never before. So I think it's something like a snowball effect, and I think in certain ways it helps to revolutionize the political process.
I think I saw that too at the Urban League debate. You know, when myself and Michael Steele and Ben Cardin stood together, that's a rarity in American politics, to have a non-corporate candidate standing with the two status quo corporate parties. That is a rarity. And I could see it in the faces in the audience. You know, I came into that debate, there were a lot of Cardin and Steele t-shirts, they had their own cheerleaders. I saw one guy who was essentially a cheerleader who would sit in one seat and cheer, get the crowd going, then he moves to us and cheer, get the crowd going for Cardin. You know, they had the cheerleader in the audience. But by the end of the debate, that cheerleader was cheering more for me. And I saw that with Steele supporters too. And so they want truth as well. These two parties, they have a lot more weakness than you realize. People know they're corrupt. People know they have no ideas. And when you talk to people in the party who are wearing the Cardin and Steele t-shirts, they don't like their candidates. So if they start to see a viable alternative, it's an amazing potential, and it is a snowball effect. Now, it may not happen in this campaign. I've had a constant battle with the media to get any fair attention, and that's one of the big struggles. That's why this kind of a show you guys are doing. You're doing better. You're getting there. You have the same problem. You're the same problem. But that's why this kind of show is so important, because what you all are doing is creating our own media. We've got to challenge the corporate media with our own media, and the traditional media is losing power. You know, the peak. I was telling Jill today, the peak for the circulation for newspapers is 1984, 62 million readers a day. It's now down to 42 million, and they're losing 2.5% a year. They're getting weaker. You see it on the network news, the cable news, they're all getting weaker. And what's getting stronger? This kind of stuff. The web is getting stronger. And so we got to build our own. And that's why someone like Ben Cardin is voting to give the web to the cable companies and the telecom companies. And that's a big scare, because you lose the web. That's our last real bastion of free speech.
You know, a movie that I'd like to recommend is Man of the Year.
I saw that, yeah.
Because it really touched on just a lot of these issues.
Robin
and it
Williams?
was,
Yeah, Robin
yes,
Williams.
and it really talked about like the comedians are really hitting closer to the truth.
That's right.
And when you get like the Daily Show,
That's right.
and shows like that, people tune into those more because they have more of a pulse to the truth than just the corporate owned stale news that you hear that most people are just not buying.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
And just to be clear, I think that, while I stand by my earlier statements, I don't think that the effort is just, a worthless effort.
Oh, no, I understand that. I knew you said that.
I definitely think that we need a strong independent or a strong third party out there to inject some competition, because right now, and I'll use your term, the corporate politics, such as it is today, and I know you've all experienced this. If I'm the Republican and Jill's a Democrat, and she says, well, I like vanilla ice cream, then I've got to come out and say, well, vanilla ice cream is evil, and I'm a chocolate ice cream kind of guy. It's just like everything is just, what's going to happen. It's kind of like a soap opera. So I think that independent, or I should say third party candidacies.
And I'll tell you, the third party, the Green Party, for example, we've nominated our first gubernatorial candidate as an African-American guy. We have an African-American running up in Connecticut for governor as well. We have an African-American running the Senate up in Washington State. I think the African-American community needs to get involved in our party, and you guys could take over the Green Party. We need black leadership badly, and I need your vote on next Tuesday, because we need to have, whether I win or lose, every percent I get strengthens the move toward independent politics. And these two guys are not worth your vote. These guys are corporate candidates. You're wasting your vote if you vote for either one of them. That's how I feel about these two candidates. So I want your vote, my friend.
Well, can I just play, I guess, sort of devil's advocate on that for a moment, because I do want to address something that I think is important, which is that the mentality of, well, I like Kevin Zeese, an independent candidate, but the reality is he's probably not going to win, and I don't want to throw my vote away. So I want to choose between one of the two more viable candidates. How do you?
I think that's a mistaken way to look at it, because if I'd like to go back, as I do often, to the 1850s, when the issue was slavery. And you had two parties, the Democrats and the Whigs. They both profited from slavery. The Democrats were plantation owners. The Whigs were northern industrialists who liked cheap cotton. It was a profitable thing for them. In fact, slavery was as valuable as all the other industries combined at the time. So neither party would discuss slavery. It was off the agenda. The way that got broken through was abolition parties, small parties that didn't win. They won some small races. They gradually started to win, but initially they didn't win. But that's not wasting your vote. And the same is true today. You're not wasting your vote when you say, I am not going to submit to corporate control of our government. I want a people-controlled government. And so I think just like in the 1850s, if you voted for the lesser evil northern industrialists, the Whigs, That's the wasted vote. And I know I wouldn't have voted for them. And I don't think anyone here would have voted for them. So I think the same is true today. We are being made slaves to the corporate government. We're seeing 18,000 deaths a year because of lack of health insurance. We're seeing, education, boards of education taken over by the corporations and educating students or not educating students for their own purposes. We're seeing no minimum wage. In fact, we're seeing poverty rise. We're seeing 1 out of 4 full-time workers earning less than $10 an hour. That's where the poverty rise is coming from workers, not from people unemployed. We're seeing middle class stagnant. We're seeing the wealthiest get so obscenely wealthy that the top 1% has the same wealth as the bottom 95% combined. Voting for either one of these two parties is voting for that status quo. So I think, in fact, you waste your vote. Now, I know Michael Steele's scary because he's really wrong on a lot of issues. But frankly, Ben Cardin's scary too. He's voted for the Patriot Act. He's voted for the war consistently. He's not taking the bomb of Iran off the table. He's one of the largest recipients of pro-Israeli lobby money. He's taking money from the health insurance industry, from the defense industry, from the pharmaceutical industry. He voted against cheaper drugs coming in from outside the country, so we pay 3 times as much as other countries do for the same drugs. He is not a friend of the people. I'm sorry. And so I think voting for either one of these candidates is a wasted vote. Voting for what you stand for, voting for what you want, that's not wasting your vote.
Let me ask you this, and this is key to all of that. If you go back to the 1850s and you look at the level of intellect, we've got better technology, but I swear I don't think we've got more intellect. The electorate is just so susceptible to glossy ads and being told how to think. I got to believe that the minority is the group that's going to look at the issues and decide intellectually on who they're going to vote for. How do you compete with that?
Well, I think it doesn't have to be that way. And one of the roles of my campaign and other campaigns like mine, and even your campaigns, is to change that. Is to get the electorate involved and more educated and more informed. And it doesn't have to be that way just because it is that way. The idea of my run for office is to shrink the difference between what could be and what is, to make us move toward what could be. And that's what my goal is to try to help to make that happen, to make us a better country, move toward that more perfect union we always hear about in American history. And so I think if we want to see that kind of change, we got to vote for that kind of change. If you want to see, the two candidates who are running are exactly those kind of candidates. So voting for either one of them reinforces that kind of political activity. You want to break away from that, then don't vote for those two candidates. And don't write Mickey Mouse in either. That's a wasted vote.
I always write in.
You write in his own name.
That's also. You should run, my friend. You should run for office. I'd be happy to see you run for office. We need more people run for office like you. We really do.
Have you seen the previous shows, Kevin?
I have. We need people run for office, my friend.
We have to wrap up. Kevin, give some information, and people want to get some more information about you.
Yeah, please. My website is zeesforsenate.org. You can see on my website, by the way, the first debate. Actually, all the debates. We put them all up, but the Urban League debate in particular, I think, was the most exciting one. You can see that debate in full. We put up all the 3 debates we've had together in full, so you can see those. My positions are very clear on the website. And you can contact me if you want to complain about a white guy being on the show. My email is kzeese@earthlink.net. Feel free to call and complain. Don't bother these guys. I pressured them real hard.
I won't answer the phone.
So feel free to contact me and let me know if there's a problem with that. Because I think my agenda is the one with health care for all, free college education, free preschool, end the Iraq War, fair wage for full-time work. My agenda is the agenda for the poor, minority, oppressed communities that exist in this country. So I hope you'll support me.
Well, that's Brothaspeak. With our special guest, Mr. Kevin Zeese. I'm voting for this guy. I am. I like his policies. I like his issues. And it's time for change. I'm tired of voting for the lesser of 2 evils. I pray that whoever you vote for, that you would do the research, do the homework, and vote who you feel like will represent you and your issues. We're also certainly blessed to have Delegate Jill Carter. Prayerfully, she'll hang around for a minute. I want to do something special with the delegate if she can stick around. But we certainly thank you. Please spread the word. We want to thank, before we go, Obi Linton. We want to thank him so much. Yes, thank you so much. He owns the site. He tapes the show. He edits the show. He does everything. This man is awesome. And I really do pray and hope that Black TV Online continues to grow and flourish, because this is the only way you're going to get news and information that's independent thinking, that's really hitting the pulse of where the people are. So thank you for tuning in, and please come back. We're going to have another special interview that you won't want to miss. This has been Brothaspeak. My name is Heber Brown. Have a great one.